it's important to have a easy operational platform. They can talk to their members as well as their system can talk to us.
You're listening to Sports Tech Feed, the global sports technology podcast.
Hello and welcome to Sports Tech Feed. I'm your host, Thomas Loams. Great to have you join us again this week. On today's show, we have Rocky Chow, Chief Commercial Officer at Hong Kong Rugby Union, in conversation with Cameron O'Riordan. Founded in 1952, the Hong Kong Rugby Union, HKRU for short, is the governing body of Hong Kong Rugby and a not-for-profit organisation where all revenue is channeled back into developing the game. This session focused on redesigning a sports federation from the ground up, so there's great conversations about digitisation and technology solutions that help sports grow, all the way from the grassroots and the youth level to the elite level and the pro competition. Obviously amongst that is the impact of COVID as well, so there's some great tips for sports organisations and leagues looking to bounce back from that with participation and getting their competitions back online. This session is drawn from our 2020 Virtual Australian Sports Innovation Week. This year we're back in person in Queensland from the 24th to the 26th of November. You can go to sportstechworldseries.com if you'd like to find out more information about registration. And if you're in the majority of our listenership who are tuning in from outside Australia and outside of Queensland, then you can also sign up to our newsletter, sportstechworldseries.com/newsletter. You can stay up to date with the presentation recordings from the Australia event, as well as other news and insights from the world of sports tech. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm your host, Thomas Loams. I won't be taking on this conversation. I'm giving that to our very capable friend of the show, Cameron O'Riordan, formerly Director of Sales and Marketing at Game Day, so also a special shout out to Game Day, formerly Sports TG. Cam's now at Crowdclip. As I said, friend of the show, but also just a really passionate contributor to the industry, a board member on the Australian Sports Technologies Network, and very, very generous with his time in helping companies and individuals thrive in the sports tech industry, which is what we're all about here. Thanks again for listening. This is Rocky Chow, Chief Commercial Officer, Hong Kong Rugby Union, on Sports Tech Feed, the global sports technology podcast.
And thank you very much for having us here at the Sports Tech World Series. I'm really privileged and lucky enough to be joined by Rocky Chow, the Chief Commercial Officer of the Hong Kong Rugby Union. Rocky's got a great experience within the industry. He's worked in the sports industry for quite some time. He's skilled in coaching, sales, supplements, customer relationship management and team building. Rocky's got a strong business development and professional with a Bachelor of Arts focused in sports administration locally here in Canberra in Australia, which is great. And Rocky's been a familiar face with rugby circles and a long-standing member of the Hong Kong rugby community and has been really involved with the development of Gai Wu Rugby Football Club, one of the pioneering Chinese rugby clubs in Hong Kong. He currently still represents Gai Wu's first 11 as a hooker. He's also represented the Hong Kong Dragons in the early 90s. He's been selected to tours to Singapore and Thailand. And prior to that, Rocky played for the famous Tigers Rugby Football Club in the early 90s and one of the first local players to play division rugby in Hong Kong. Rocky, thank you very much for joining us. It's a privilege to have you here today. And I hope everything's going well over in Hong Kong at the moment.
Yeah, no, thanks, Cam. I really appreciate the invite. So, now it's great. It's great to jump on. And Hong Kong's slowly coming back online. We've gone through a couple of waves and a few lockdowns, but the community's been quite patient with us. And this weekend we're launching both our men's and women's premiership. So can't wait to get some sort of top end rugby up and going.
Fantastic. So. Look, like I said, it's great to have you here today. And, you know, every organisation, we're well represented here today with a number of sports tech companies and sporting organisations from Australia and also internationally like yourself. Hong Kong Rugby Union is a pretty well-established organisation in Asia and one of the leaders of innovation and early adopters of technology in the region. Hong Kong Rugby's gone through, you know, a number of studies and reports on the participation and the state of rugby in Hong Kong. Earlier in the year, what did you learn, you know, in your role at Hong Kong Rugby Union as a result of that study in participation in the sport as a whole, and what were the recommendations that came out of that, Rocky?
Oh, great! No, thanks for highlighting that. So we've done a few sort of targeted studies here and there throughout the years, you know, over 60 years. So this is actually the most comprehensive survey that we've done with the assistance of KPMG. And with the key objectives for us is to looking at quantifying the rugby playing population in Hong Kong, and then understanding what are the factors of engagement or retention, and then looking at also what are some of the engagement factors of spectatorship and events for Hong Kong as well. So we have a pretty small playing community of about 12,000 strong, but very, very engaged. And as very similar across the globe, there is a reduction trend from the playing front, in Australia, New Zealand, and the UK as well. And looking at, it was important for us to understand what are the key joining and dropout age brackets, and also what are the key reasons why they join and why they drop out, and the stats are quite different compared to the other sort of more established rugby nations, T1 rugby nations in the world.
Fantastic. And we've been lucky enough to sort of join forces with Hong Kong Rugby Union earlier this year. And, we sort of worked with the touch football arm of your organisation for over 12 months now, and now rolling out a digital solution to the sport in Hong Kong. What was some of the factors that leaned you towards rolling out and moving towards a centralised digital offering and platform across your sport? And what are some of the goals and objectives that you're looking to achieve from doing that?
Great question. So that comprehensive KPMG survey, that it was the first time we've done it as a union over 60 years. And I think it's probably going to be very difficult for us to try and do that every 60 years. And we want to do it a little bit more regularly. And one of the key recommendations they gave us was we need to have a centralized system for our community. We've established 4 years ago our CRM platform, which works quite well. We've got about 150,000 plus unique data points out of that, which is great. But we don't really have a comprehensive understanding of our community, based on the result we saw from the KPMG study. We've tried many different things throughout the years. We've got, as you mentioned, working with you guys with touch rugby, touch football, and also we've tried different avenues of a bespoke system on player registration with youth, and we've looked at a semi-bespoke system to deal with the senior rugby, and out of all the experiments and experiences in the last 3 or 4 years, we found when we work with you guys for the touch rugby side of things, that the off-the-shelf component and everything, and your the sports TG platform with the experience and everything else, that was pretty beneficial for the team. And so hence we went and looked at sort of branching out that relationship with you guys.
Fantastic. And, obviously in your role, you would have seen many different technology systems, not just ours, but a whole heap come and go and be implemented, and it's still with you. And, congratulations on the success that you've had with the implementation of your CRM project. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've learned and faced when introducing new technology or new systems or new processes to your sport, either at the Hong Kong Rugby Union level or even right down to that grassroots community level?
Now, I think the key is with people. I think managing stakeholders. What we're trying to do with you guys is more of a holistic approach, where we are not looking at just providing a governing body solution for Hong Kong Rugby. We want to be able to provide a community management solution as well across the piece. As we see, there is a massive benefit if each of the local community clubs have a good understanding of their demographic. Given a lot of those guys are volunteers, it's important to have an easy operational platform that they can talk to their members, as well as their system can talk to us, and we can access information without having those volunteers doing a lot more heavy lifting work themselves. And at the same time, we would be able to provide decent analytical information for them to help them grow, to help them manage.
Just give us a bit of an insight, Rocky, on the structure of Hong Kong Rugby Union. I've sort of learnt a lot this year myself, I must say, from your minis to your youth to your tertiary to your touch football arm to your seniors. There's sometimes a club that you may start with in under sixes, but it's not necessarily the same club you will end up playing with if you're playing senior rugby. Do you just want to touch on that aspect a little bit?
Absolutely, the hierarchy is quite unique. So we've had to. I think we can look at the Hong Kong Rugby Union structure, or the Hong Kong rugby structure, as kind of four-tiered. So you've got starting with mini rugby, which then you're looking at 5-year-olds all the way up to 11. Then you've got youth rugby, which is Colts rugby, starting from 12 all the way to under 19s, and that sort of transition to senior rugby. And then you've got your school component that attached to it as well. Now, focusing on the club side of things, because of the 60 plus years heritage, there are clubs that are only offering mini rugby components, and there are clubs that are only offering Colts. However, there are also clubs that has that full complement from mini all the way through, so a nice clean pathway. Now, having a holistic system that will allow us to see those potential partnerships between mini, youth, and senior. So if we're seeing, for a mini rugby club, that there's a massive dropout from under 12s, they're not going into youth rugby because of the lack of pathway as a big contributor, then we will be able to start managing that relationship and making the introductions with youth and senior clubs, so the kids can have a nice pathway, and so we can retain the ones we have, because we don't have a big community, so that's key. Also, having the ability to understand, for example, for a youth player who's currently playing for their club, but they don't play for their school, but the school have absolutely no idea that that's happened. Johnny is playing is playing for one of the Premiership under 19 clubs that they could represent a school as well, and vice versa. Now having that centralized visibility would give us a very powerful tool to be able to make those connections, and again keeping the people within the game and be able to manage those relationships effectively.
Fantastic. And with the, you're obviously part of the pioneering behind one of the local clubs in Gaiwu locally. What's the strategy from a Hong Kong Rugby Union perspective in getting more local players engaged with the sport? And have you seen an increase in those participations with local players? And what's the union doing to increase that sort of participation?
A great question. I think from the KPMG survey, people when they look at local Hong Kong people, when they look at rugby as a whole, as a sport in Hong Kong, they see it as a westernized sport, playing by mostly expats. But surprisingly, from the KPMG survey, over 50% of people playing rugby in Hong Kong within our community are local Chinese. So it shows that we've done quite a bit of good work in terms of getting that message down to the local community. As we do a lot of work with schools, how do we connect schools with clubs, etc. Those are very important aspects. I think one of the things we need to do better going forward now having that KPMG result is we know what are some of the key reasons why people join rugby at different ages. We've got actually a massive influx of senior players at the age of 30, because now they've worked for a few years after uni, and they've got a nice steady income. They've now got a bit of spare time, and so they look at maybe picking up team sports and so forth. So having a good understanding of where those engagement points are, and we would be able to try and retain to start with, and how we engage better with the local community, because we know those touch points, and then by having the system, then we know the efforts that we're doing is making impact or not.
Fantastic. And, with rugby as a sport, it's never really shy of introducing and innovating and introducing new technology. How's that translate when you introduce new technology into the community space? What are the particular challenges that you face this year? And how do you go about managing those challenges that you face in the community space?
Yeah, I think one of the big ones is outside of Premiership rugby, where they have full-time staff working there. You are dealing with volunteers. It's important that whatever solution that we have selected and provided for them, that makes their job easier, not asking them to do more work. So that way they can spend their time effectively and passionately to help manage the game. So that's one of the key factors that when we're considering the solutions, and then having good stats and reporting that we could share back with the community, so they can then seek out support from us, or they seek out, if it's a coaching resource they need in terms of retaining players or improving their players. Now, having good reporting would help them identify those opportunities and weaknesses, and that way they'll be able to seek support from us or through different channels, and then dealing with different levels of understanding. Some clubs are still using Excel spreadsheets, and some clubs are basically managing things of pen and paper. So which is going through this process was quite a good learning process for us, and so we now have a better understanding throughout the community, after we've launched the centralized system, what we need to do between this season and next season, and the amount of education and support we need to provide in order to get them up to speed and them really enjoying and benefiting from the centralized system.
Yeah, look, we're pretty excited about one of the tools that we're rolling out with Hong Kong Rugby Union, and we've got a couple of different assets of that there now. I'm working in different iterations with our Game Day View product to help you understand those analytics, and essentially a business intelligence tool. So it can help you with benchmarking or managing KPIs for growth. Does Hong Kong Rugby Union have KPIs set for growth in the future, and what are you looking to achieve? Are you looking at growing the sport at a junior level, at a senior level, or just maintaining the participation at a senior level and growing at the junior level?
I think, yeah, good question. I think for us, again, referring back to that comprehensive research we've done recently, we've seen a massive dropout at, for example, under 8s, where we're starting from non-contact touch footy with kids into contact, and also from under 11s into under 12, so from minis to youth. So we've gone from a 5,000 strong mini rugby community into a 1,500 youth community. So that's quite a big attrition rate. So for us is to get a better understanding now, working with the clubs on how to plug those holes. So our goal for the next 4 years is to looking at retention, and then looking at the second point is engagement. So we've done a lot of work with schools. So we are in 250 plus secondary schools and 100 plus primary schools in Hong Kong that has rugby programs there, and also 26 plus tertiary institutions have rugby teams. Now, before we are not 100% clear how many of those are playing club rugby. Now we have an opportunity to know that and start making those introductions. So there is a massive pool of potential players that that might not be playing club rugby at the moment, and we can start making those introductions and feeder into the club community to make them more sustainable at every level. So let's say, for example, you've got the primary school kids coming to the mini rugby section, secondary school into the youth section, tertiary into the senior section. So each of the areas can start getting potential feeder from the school community, and then out of then from a club community is to retain them the best we can by providing options to play.
That's great. The retention is key there, and obviously, COVID may have had a big impact on that this year, and it's obviously had an impact on everyone here attending the conference today, no matter what sport they're involved in, whether in Australia, Hong Kong, New Zealand, or over in Europe. With the delay of your senior competition and your junior competition, I know your minis are underway and your senior comp recommences this weekend. How are you progressing with the domestic competition? What other rules have you had to put in place due to COVID? Have you had to introduce a new season format? And how have you managed that communication and the expectations of a season with your premiership clubs?
Yeah, I think the beauty of having a slightly tighter, smaller community and very niche community is the benefit of that is they are quite they're quite willing to work together to crack on. So I think in terms of from a premiership point of view, we normally play a warm up challenge trophy that we focus on a junior development where of under 19 players playing, featuring in premiership. Hopefully they'll perform well and then they'll continue their premiership season. We wanted to make sure that we can finish our premiership this year. So we're kicking off premiership first rather than a challenge trophy, and then the challenge trophy will come on towards the tail end of the season, and we're staggering our community rugby as well. So as mentioned, premiership starts this weekend. Community rugby starts on the 5th of December. So we rather than playing 3 rounds, we're looking at reducing it to 2 rounds, making sure that everyone can get through the season and actually have a decent finale of it. In terms of rules, we are quite fortunate that we can retain from a playing perspective the same rules for the senior game. It's just how we manage number of people at each venue that we got to be careful of. Youth rugby also kicked off last weekend, and the youth premiership kicks off this weekend. Very similar formats. Obviously, because of COVID, we have a slightly less registration this year, and with the centralized system, we can now see it first, real time, which is good for us. Then we can actually go back to the clubs and say, are there things that we can help to actually bridge that gap? Do we put a tournament in towards the end of the season, etc., to help bring those players who didn't play this season back and at least keep them interested? And same thing with mini rugby. This is the first time for us that we can actually get direct communications with the mini rugby kids, and that way will give us good visibility to see how we actually better manage schedule-wise with the mini rugby festivals, which there's 8 of them a year, and they have about 5,000 kids that run around from 8 a.m. till about 6 p.m. So they are slightly more difficult at this stage to host because of COVID. But obviously we are quite prepared to extend our domestic season into middle of 2021 anyway.
So for future seasons, you might have to go to a reduced competition format, and you retweak things for 2021. And it's probably the last thing in the back of your head, but I imagine there would be a bit of planning underway. Are you looking to hopefully re-kick 2021 as a normal season start and a full season across your competitions, everything permitting, touch wood?
Yes. Well, our official domestic season don't really start until September. So touch wood, fingers crossed, everything. Now, hearing the vaccine is potentially coming on board, in Q3, Q4 to 2021. If that stays on track, I think we are in good shape of doing, starting the 2021-22 season back to the normal, which is great.
Fantastic. And when people think of rugby and they think of Hong Kong, or I don't know if it's everyone, but it might just be me, I think of the Hong Kong Sevens. It's an institution. I think it's got its own brand. It's got its own great brand that's known right around the world. Obviously, it didn't go ahead in 2020, and that's an important commercial arm of the Hong Kong Rugby Union. What planning is underway from your end for the 2021 event? It is a massive event. You get a stadium full of everyone dressed up, having the time of their lives, a great 2 to 3 day festival. I imagine there's things like travel, accounting for international teams, the volunteer management, and all those things that go with it. What are you guys doing at Hong Kong Rugby to plan for the 2021 event at the moment?
Yeah, good question. We are still full steam ahead. Our scheduled event is on the 2nd to 4th of April, 2021. So the team is still planning, as we are scheduled to operate the event. Two key components for us, really. One is to work closely with the government to ensure that they are comfortable with what we are proposing on managing players. So, with the travel restrictions at the moment, how do we get the players in? How in terms in the bubble? How do we sort of in terms of testing, in terms of how we move them around and from a hotel to training facilities back into the stadium, and making sure that the participating teams stays within the bubble. And then secondly, obviously, is making sure the government is happy with us to have crowds within the stadium, and what that means to us, we don't know. We are consulting closely with the government. We have a proposal out there with it. We are sharing proposals with different government departments, and they are generally very supportive. But it's important that we get that sign off from the government for us to proceed. And then next step is working closely with World Rugby, because so we align globally, because if there are no players that can come to Hong Kong, then that doesn't matter. We can put the best party on. There's nothing in the middle. So we need to make sure that the quality of the competition is there, and having a good sort of track and tracing system is important for us, in terms of having such a mega event we have here. Staff and spectators, they're all based out in Hong Kong. And I think, we've had 40 plus years experience running the Sevens. It's just, that's part of our planning on how do we keep our staff safe, and as well as making sure that we can still deliver the same standard of events that we've been doing for over 40 years.
I imagine, putting together a large event like the Sevens, you'd rely quite heavily on a volunteer base. Do you want to touch on what you do as an organisation to recruit volunteers for such an event, retain them year on year, and keep them engaged?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we are constantly learning and evolving. So the beauty of our rugby community is they are very engaged. So and being a part of the iconic event is a big attraction. So we, a lot of our volunteers do come from within the playing community, from both schools, clubs, etc. That we have a ton of part-time coaches that would be team managers for the teams, liaison officers, and so forth. And then also we do reach out to different institutions, tertiary education bodies, and offer internships and work experience for their events, marketing events type students, so they can come and experience the event, as well as become a volunteer. So we've been quite fortunate in the past over a couple of decades that we've been the rugby community, as well as the the school community has been very supportive.
Fantastic. And, just sort of looping back to, those challenges and those things that you're working through, from player bubbles to international travel of teams to working with World Rugby and the local government, of course, in Hong Kong. In a couple of weeks' time, there's a major horse racing event taking place in Hong Kong, up in Sha Tin. And do you work with any other sporting organisations or any other international organisations or local organisations like the Hong Kong Jockey Club to see how they would go about, flying in international jockeys, what processes they're putting in place to help you roll out for your 2021 event?
Absolutely. We are, we do communicate closely with the sporting community. The proposals that we've sent to the government are, we've touched base with the Jockey Club, with the golf associations, because they're looking at doing something very, very similar. Football Association as well, in terms of they're the ones who've actually got approval from Home Affairs Bureau in terms of getting spectators into their Premiership games starting this weekend, which then opens up the door for us in regards to getting spectators to our Premiership games. So it's important that we actually work closely with the different sporting organisations and learn what the best practices or strategies that they're taking, to work with governments or ways that they're planning to host events.
Fantastic. Well, do you want to touch on, Rocky, what the future holds for Hong Kong rugby? And I know if you to look into a crystal ball, and let's put the 2020 year behind us, and we've got a great year coming up in 2021. What's installed for Hong Kong rugby in 2021 and beyond 2021?
Oh, good question. I think you're always looking at the blessing in disguise, right? So COVID's actually given us an opportunity to focus on the local game. Because prior to that, we've had the luxury of running the sevens tournament. We had tons of international competitions that we could host. Bringing international teams. We were talking about November International before with us playing Canada again as a rematch of the repechage in France, and that would be an international spectacle. But now with COVID, we really have to say, right, let's look after the one we have. So bringing that focus in the local game, and now we have a better understanding of the local community. We are able to start doing a lot more work there, and also COVID's given us a chance to refocus and revamp some of the local programs that we do, and how we work with local companies. So we don't, Hong Kong Sevens is a massive international event, but there are 7 million people that lives here. And lots of companies that would love to work with sport, and how do we better do that? And so we're at the same time promoting the local game and using our sport to connect with the local community. I think COVID has given us an opportunity now and the time during this period to review that opportunity. And because the digital need of COVID, we're now looking at how we do broadcast better. With launching our own OTT platform, for example, in the next couple of weeks, which is very exciting for our Premiership. And then making sure that our local game is solid, because 2021 we actually have a pretty busy international schedule with both our men's and women's 15s team looking to qualify for the Rugby World Cup in 2021 and also 2023, and then and fingers crossed the Olympics will go ahead as in June. Both our men's and women's sevens will look at heading to a repechage to qualify for the Olympics in Tokyo as well. And then in April next year, our under 20 boys would be looking to requalify again the Junior World Trophy. So from international front, it's going to be quite busy. And we are hoping in November 2021 that will kick off an interesting. We've heard sort of concepts from World Rugby on a tier 2 international competition which we can get involved. Hong Kong could get involved in with Japan, Fiji, etc. So that's a potential. If that goes ahead, that would be fantastic for us. Looking at hosting more international events in Hong Kong from rugby point of view.
That's awesome. And you touched on a really good point. And someone said to us, it was a CEO of another sporting organisation earlier this year, COVID gave them a chance to work on their sport rather than in their sport. And I think you sort of nailed it right there, where it gave you that breathing space and time. And, we're genuinely excited about our future partnership and our plans for being able to provide a digital ecosystem that we do for the entire sport to help you with your goals and objectives moving forward. And it sounds like 2021 on the international front is going to be busy for Hong Kong as a whole, from under 20s right through to men's and women's and sevens, come hopefully qualifying for the Olympic Games next year. Rocky, I really appreciate your time, and really appreciate you giving up a bit of your time here today to join us at the Sports Tech World Series. For anyone who may have some questions for you or want to reach out to you, can they find you online anywhere? Where's the best way for someone to get in touch with you if they wanted to get in touch with you after the conference today?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so under the name Rocky Chow. So feel free to reach out to me, and then I'll get in touch, and we can happy to network or answer any questions that people might have.
Thanks very much, Rocky. Really appreciate your time, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
There you have it. That was Rocky Chow, Chief Commercial Officer, Hong Kong Rugby Union, in conversation with Cam O'Riordan, Director of Sales and Marketing at Game Day, now Commercial Manager with Crowdclip. So, as I said at the beginning, a shout out, a thanks to Game Day and Sports TG and everyone that was there for putting together that session at the 2020 Virtual Australian Sports Innovation Week. I'm very excited to be back in person. I unfortunately won't be able to be there. Austin to Queensland is a bit of a no-no with various travel restrictions at the moment, but I look forward to learning from all the content that's coming out of that, all the sessions, all the discussions, all the what next moments that come out of that. And certainly Queensland is an exciting place to be when it comes to sports technology, especially in the next 10 years leading up to the Olympics. So really great to kick off that relationship that we have with Queensland and the various arms of government there with the Australian Sports Innovation Week. Until next time, I'm your host, Thomas Loams. Thanks again for joining Sports Tech Feed, the global sports technology podcast.